Everybody good? Everybody good? Who's here? I've lost some people from online. I don't know if I've offended anybody, if the course is too challenging.
It's too racy.
It is a bit racy, isn't it? I know. Before we get started, I just want you won't be able to actually see it, but the title of this journal is called Teaching Tolerance. What's the problem with that title? Anybody? Christopher, I'm going to tolerate you.
Tolerance still has a negative connotation to it.
Because it is a
tolerating
negative.
something.
You're
It's like you're putting up
standing
with
it. You're putting up with it. This is not the word to use. The word to use is embrace. Embracing. It's nothing other than tolerance. Diversity, whatever. Yeah, I'm really disappointed in issue 60. It's been going around for a long time.
Oh, wow.
A lot of people just tolerating teaching.
Yeah, I guess. So, I don't know. And I need a better title. I don't think I even want
Is
to
that
look
really
at
the
this
theme
thing.
of the magazine?
Yes, this
Kind of in
one
that
is
tone.
Inspire Future Voters, Matthew Shepard, 20-year his legacy. 20 years later, white privilege, update your understanding. Those are some, the school to deportation pipeline. Is your school putting undocumented students at risk? But that title just makes me crazy. LGBTQ best practices.
You can read it two different ways, though, right?
Yeah, the
Tolerating
negative.
teaching or teaching people tolerance of other
But
topics.
it comes back to the same
Either way,
thing.
right, I get
It
you.
comes back to the same thing, tolerating. Anyway, I just wanted to bring that up.
Not a great title for me.
It's not a great title, not for an academic journal, for heaven's sake. Think about it, folks. Odds. So here's our agenda for today. I've got a little thing on writing tips that I want to show you. We'll be talking about week 6 and 7, which it's the proposal for next week, and 7 is Wicked. So you should be working on that because it's long. But it's a great listen if you want to do it through Audible.
I started listening, but when I saw it's like 19 hours.
19, well, I won't get it all done. I've got 12 hours of driving time this weekend, so I guess I won't get it done. I'll have to drive someplace else. I'll be taking questions about the paper topic. We'll be returning to Zell and others regarding the discussion board because Secret Garden came up quite a bit. I'm going to show you my lovely edition of Wizard of Oz, and then we'll discuss the novel and film and articles. Wow, is that not organized or what? This is so not me. But I'm going to embrace it so you can tolerate it. So writing tips. And this is, everybody has them. I just want to bring up a couple of things. So, because I keep writing or encountering these undergraduate and graduate students. So there's this thing that I see with indirect sources, things being quoted within an article, and you want to quote that quote. So one of the things here is this, I bet I didn't. Frequently what you would do with an indirect source like this, you would say, Peter Brown, drawing from Marcia Thomas, underscores Thomas's thoughts that, quotation mark, then you give Thomas's thoughts. Now you don't have to do quoted in then, you can do the initial person's in-text citation. But if you don't, then you have to do parentheses, quoted in, So whenever you can, take material from the original source, not a secondhand one. Sometimes only an indirect source is available. What you want to do is, for instance, Samuel Johnson admitted that Edmund Burke was an, quote, extraordinary man. It is quoted in Boswell. So that's how you work through that. It wasn't Burke who came up with the idea. Well, it was Burke, but I don't know. Samuel, oh, yeah. Oh, hold it, sorry. Samuel Johnson, I was getting James Boswell and Samuel Johnson mixed up. So Samuel Johnson admitted that Edmund Burke was, quote, an extraordinary man. The text that you're reading from is James Boswell's A Life of Johnson. So that's how you work away around something like that, or work into it. So it's quoted in. So you're going to run into, you know, all the articles that you read should have numerous citations within it. So when you quote from a text that is quoting somebody else, you don't include that one in your works cited necessarily. This would not have, I can't tell if, this would not have Samuel Johnson in it or Edmund Burke in the works cited, most likely. Instead, it's just the James Boswell. What else do I have for writing tips? So that takes care of indirect sources quoted in, and then quotations within quotations, kind of the same thing. But what I keep seeing is double quotation marks, and it's a double quotation mark, single quotation mark. So for instance, you have here, Bobby told me, comma, quotation mark, Della said, comma, in text or inside quotation mark, this will never work, quotation mark, double quotation marks. See how that works? Okay.
I tried teaching that to my 7th graders today.
It's not easy, is it?
That was the best.
Because there's not a word for, I guess it's single and double quotation marks. I don't know. Guess.
That's what I call it too. But they looked at me like I was speaking a totally different language. So
yeah.
I was like, forget it. Never mind.
Yeah. And there's no reason that I can think of to use single quotation marks unless it's within another set of quotation marks. There's all kinds of misunderstandings about when to use single quotation marks. That's the only time I can think of to use one. This is about noun-pronoun agreement. So, oh no, sorry, this is about introducing an article. So that you have Peter J. Smith in his book, Between Two Stools. This is a true book. Scatology and its representations. Does anybody know what scatology is?
Is it the study of scat?
Study of poo. Fecal matter.
Why
not? Well, Chaucer and Shakespeare really were kind of into it. Anyways, Peter J. Smith, in his book, Between Two Stools, Scatology and Its Representations in English Literature, Chaucer to Swift, he writes, actually that would be in Peter Smith's, no, Peter Smith in his book, he writes, that's garbled. So Peter J. Smith in Between Swift, writes. Really simple and to the point. Gets rid of some words you don't need. Did I not? Okay, I didn't add the noun-pronoun agreement, so never mind on that one.
I do have a question. If it was not a book and it was an article,
Mm-hmm.
let's say, so it's in quotation marks, does the comma go inside the quotation marks or does it
Yes.
go outside?
Inside.
Okay.
Punctuation, periods and commas go inside quotation marks unless there's an in-text citation to put the period after.
Okay.
And I didn't have to put book in there because that it's italicized tells you it's a book. So just a couple of writing tips there to keep in mind.
Dr. Stewart,
Yo.
can you move this podium?
No, absolutely not. Sorry.
I can't see through it. I tried.
So writing tips, that takes care of that. Weeks 6 and 7. So next week you'll be talking about your proposals in class. We'll be catching up kind of as this week goes by. I want you to think about some of the commonalities, what you've seen throughout the semester so far on these transformations, on these adaptations, on whatever. Identify some themes. I'm not asking you to write them out, but be able to talk about them. This will be, next week will pretty much be all y'all talking and not me very much, not like I usually do. Maybe, who knows? And I think, and then Wicked. Just read Wicked. For online folks, you'll be doing what you normally do, but it's long. Who started it and who's read it?
Started it.
You have read it before? You like it?
Oh, yeah, I love that book.
Alex, have you read it before?
Read it before. It's like 10 years ago.
Like it?
Oh, yeah.
I
I saw
love
the
it.
show in Dallas.
Oh.
It's been making me think for so many years. It's fun.
I want to see it. A good one.
Yeah.
Was it a good one?
Oh, yes.
Ah, you should have said, no, it stunk.
It was terrible.
Thank you. I feel better now.
I wasted my time and money.
Oh, thank you. I feel so much better now. All right, questions about the paper topic? The assignment that's coming up, that's due next week?
So we need to submit those online, because I saw where we submit the assignment. Okay.
Put it in there and do it before class so that we can talk about it. And I try to get it in Tuesday if you can. I'll start working on it Tuesday and putting these together in a PowerPoint so we can talk about them and talk about ideas. Because part of the class period is going to be spent brainstorming, helping you figure out things. And we'll talk about what you did. And you can write on the same book, you can write on the same topic, because nobody's going to come up with the same thing. Yes,
What if we wanted to focus more on one of the movies?
that's fine too.
Okay.
Yeah, I can't, as much as I should have you write about nothing but some kind of comparison between the original text and the adaptation or transformation. That's going to be too narrow, I'm afraid. But it does need to reflect the nature of this course.
So this paper topic, I'm confused. This is a potential paper?
No, that assignment's gone.
Okay, this is our proposals.
Yes.
Okay. I was confused because paper topic phrase, I guess.
Yeah, sorry, your proposal.
So this is
Yeah.
for our conference paper, right? For the
That's correct.
the word about, and we have the 5 sources at least as of now.
That is correct.
Okay.
That was Jennifer. Invisible Jennifer.
Yes. Eerie.
So everybody's good on it for now? If you have some questions about maybe directions that you want to go right now, bring those up. I already answered one, and I think we came up with some pretty good stuff.
If mine is, well, I don't know, mine's specific, I feel like my question is. So
That's all right.
Okay, so I want to do mine about Native American literature and whatnot, but specifically for the CFLA conference.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little off of this course
That's
specifically,
okay.
but is that okay?
That's okay. Remember, that's due the 15th.
Yes, I know.
I
That's
know.
why I'm like,
Gotta
wanna
get
use
this
to do
done.
that at once, so I
Yeah.
kill 2 birds with 1 stone.
Is anybody else going to submit something to CHLA?
I was thinking about it, I wanted to talk to you about it.
Okay, what did you have specific?
Well, one of my main things I've always been interested in is the lack of LGBTQ representation in adolescent literature.
Mhm.
So I wanted to maybe go about that and how they are represented in older novels and such.
Here's something, transforming heteronormative literature. So, yeah, you could absolutely. You don't have to say that, but since you're directing it for CHLA, yes, that would work. Shay, Kirsty, Jennifer?
Nothing yet.
In researching what's already been done, say I'm going out there to kind of get an idea of what's already been done along the lines of what I want to write, or even find other scholarly articles to support the paper. When I was looking for articles to read for this week's post, I was kind of at a loss as to what is the best database to use that's available through the library. Is there a recommendation that you'd make?
My favorite is Project Muse.
JSTOR is the closest.
JSTOR, kind of, yeah.
Project Muse?
Project Muse, the MLA International Bibliography. There'll be some crossover on those.
Project Muse, and what was the one that you mentioned?
JSTOR.
That's pretty good. JSTOR has a lot on like older classic literature.
Yes.
Children's literature, Project Muse is the best one.
Yes, because it has in it Children's Literature Association Quarterly, Lion and the Unicorn. It might have some others in it too.
They also have a lot of really specific, like I study a lot of Native American, they've got a lot of Native American journals and things too, so they've got a big
Yes.
database.
And then Children's Literature and Education is a journal, but it doesn't show up. I don't think it shows up in MLA because it's education, but it's not real. It's both education and literary studies. So you can go to the website you can go to the journal through the data, or through the library databases and find it. Or you can go, did I show you how to go into the library and then to actually find a journal?
I have used in the past. I've used the EBSCO database to try and find whatever I was looking for, and I felt like the pickings were spare.
So what if I'm looking at if I want to look at a specific journal all by itself, I go to eJournals, eJournals, and then they'll be alphabetized, but I'm going to type in children's literature. Actually, if I do that, it's going to come up with the annual, the quarterly, children's literature and education. Don't go, I'd prefer that you stay away from education stuff except children's literature and education, and then new review of children's literature and librarianship. Probably not, but here's what's in 1996 to 1 year ago to present, Springer Link. What's going on with them? Escaping Adolescence, Sonia Harnett's Surrender as a Gothic Bildungsroman for the 21st Century. Let the Little Children Come to Me, anti-religious films for young spectators of the Soviet and post-Soviet period, following reading primers the wrong way, pedagogical nonsense, and Dr. Seuss. So you can see some of those articles that are there. But you can also do a search in the journal right there. If that helps. Okay. Did that help give you some?
Yeah, I'll kind of poke around and see what I can find there too. I may want to see too if there's anything I was gonna try and aim for something along the lines, provided I can form a decent thesis for my paper on this, but that intertextualism, the concept of that intertextualism between a few different texts with Zell and a couple of others, but those are kind of more
Did I
adult,
see?
like modern literature, I guess now. I don't know.
I was watching something. The most intertextual author is Stephen King, who references every single one of his previous novels and some that probably haven't come out yet in the Dark Tower series. He's so intertextual, and I don't know how he did it. How he could just continue linking everything and everything, not linking it visibly each time, but finally linking it all together. It's a mind, he's got a mind that I don't understand. But that's why he's so engaging for me. So, return to Zell and others. Why isn't it doing what it's supposed to do? So Sarah said, I adore the film Tangled and its music soundtrack, completely Disneyfied with gorgeous animation and engaging, likable characters. She thought we were funny about the phallic symbols. I guess I never really noticed or just blocked it out about the phallic symbols. And
A lot of the time you don't notice until you're looking for it.
then you don't ever,
Yeah.
then you never stop. It just pops. And it's because we don't expect it in children's literature. We just don't. It's I attribute it to, I think it's called inattentional blindness. Hold on. It's inattentional blindness. It's a psychological term. So that we just don't see some things. We block it out. Either because we're used to it, or because we don't expect it. So how many of you have had a cracked windshield in the past? Did you ever get to the point where you didn't see the crack?
Oh yeah, I have one right now that's like probably all the way across my windshield and I just ignore it.
I have in my mirror, I have a great big mirror in my bathroom, and my house has shifted a little bit, so it cracked the mirror about a year ago. I don't see it anymore. I do not see that crack until I see it. And it has to be intentional. So that with something like children's literature and some of the things that come up on it, we just don't expect to see it. And so if we don't expect to see it, it's not there. And then when somebody points it out that it is there, then you start seeing it more and more and more.
There's a video that does that. They try to tell you to pay attention to all the people that are in it, and then there's a person with a monkey suit that walks across, and you don't notice it until they point it out, and you're like, oh.
It's crazy what happens with that. But yes, that's a perfect example of inattentional blindness. It's an odd phenomenon. So blocking it out, Sarah, or perhaps it's a matter of not wanting to see it, that not wanting to believe that some of that stuff appears in children's literature. I have a book that's in the picture book that's impossible to ignore. It's called Otto's Trunk, and it's about Otto the elephant, who gets made fun of at school because his trunk is teeny weeny, itsy bitsy, is how it gets phrased. And so he learns to work magic with his trunk eventually. Yeah, he can turn it into a snake, a chicken, a rooster that goes cock-a-doodle-doo. What do you think? I mean, there is that. So I don't know. It can be any number of things.
So I'm guessing you're in the Freudian camp. Are you all in? Is that
Oh, no.
no?
No. I do think some of the things that he talks about are very realistic, but he was skewed in his observations because he only observed males, basically. I mean, yes, he did talk about Anna, but males were the norm in his world. So females had a disadvantage to begin with in terms of, and that's true for many of the developmental, what do they call them? Developmentalists who talk about children's development. They were modeling those developments after boys, not girls and boys. So those results get skewed. But yeah, I think, I've told this to lots of my students that at the end of the semester or anytime when I start getting stressed, I sign my emails best. But when I get stressed, it turns into beset. Beset means like to be beset by monsters, and the Freudian slips, they reveal something about us. Humor reveals, jokes reveal something psychological about us. My dreams, my most common dream is that of missing my class. And I've dreamed more than once this semester already about trying to find this classroom and not finding it again. And the memory is in my brain that I've had that experience before in my dreams. So it just keeps building. Oh, well, that's the 15th time. They're going to fire me for sure. That's a dream of inadequacy, that I don't feel adequate for the job, that I fear I'm not doing the job that I need to be doing. Or I've had the dream that students rebel, simply walk out and leave. And that tells you a lot about how my dreams are really transparent, really transparent. I can analyze almost any of them. Freud said, no, you need a specialist to do that. But I just figured out what those dreams were about. It's not complicated. They reflect my fears most generally. Tornado, I have flood dreams because I'm afraid that my house will flood. I always have been for some unreasonable reason. No, it wasn't unreasonable because it came up on my patio not that long ago. And I was watching it inch further and further up toward the door. So some are reasonable and some are not, but yeah, I can pick out. So yeah, I'm a Freudian to some degree. I think boys tend to look for their mother and their wife, and I think girls tend to look for their father and their husbands. Those attributes that they admire, or maybe not even admire, but they're used to. Yeah, I do. But I'm also a lot of other things. I'm a Lacanian in some ways too, but we won't go into Lacan because we don't need to. Stephanie, the problem with Tangled and why it can't be a fully feminist tale is that Disney themselves were too scared to promote it as a princess film. Not to be a total Disney nerd, but I remember prior to Tangled's release, the movie originally had Rapunzel in its title. But then the marketing strategy shifted to showcase a lot more of Flynn Rider, which is why the title became Tangled, making sure it was not anything too girly. And that gives us an explanation then of why it starts with Flynn rather than Rapunzel, whose story it belonged. It's her story. Yes.
I'm curious about this because in other countries it is called Rapunzel. Like I had a student bring me a paper in the writing center the other day, and she's a Korean student, and she said, "Oh, I used to love watching the movie Rapunzel," and I pulled up like the poster for Tangled, and I said, "Do you mean this one?" Yeah, that one, Rapunzel. So
Okay.
outside of the U.S., it is Rapunzel. So.
That's very interesting. But you know, Harry Potter, the
J.K. Rowling had to change her name.
they changed there's a British title and English American English titles because for some reason
American
the Sorcerer's Stone.
Yeah.
What was it? Is it
Philosopher's
Philosophers?
Stone.
And
they also made her sign it J.K. Rowling instead of, Joanne Kathleen, or Joanne Rowling, because they wanted to make, because, they didn't think that boys would want to read a book written by a woman.
Mm-hmm. Even though it featured, oh, how wrong were they? So very wrong. Yeah, you don't see boys carrying around Secret Garden generally to read. They might want to. They might, but.
It's going to be hidden.
If not, somebody's going to say something about it. What are you doing reading that? But if I'm reading Ender's Game as a child, nobody's going to say. They might say, "What are you doing, reading hard stuff like that?" They're not going to be saying, "What are you doing reading science fiction? You're a girl," because girls apparently read everything and boys don't.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I've always marveled at the way that the Kindle's probably opened up a lot of people's. Now, granted, you don't see a lot of people carrying around paperbacks like we used to. I mean, I've tended to for many years just put stuff in my back pocket or
I did
have
too.
them, with me.
Just in case I got thrown in jail and I had to have something to read, I've always carried
or
those.
whatever, right? Thrown in jail, hiding out, whatever you might have to do. But I think now with Kindles, it opens the door for people who
Closet readers.
Reading on
readers.
that Kindle, right? You can have a very interesting library.
As I do.
And nobody knows.
Nobody knows. So I thought that was kind of fascinating. Kirsty, so talk about this. My all-time favorite part of the film is when Rapunzel has her aha moment that she is indeed the lost princess. She states to Mother that she has figured it out, and Mother gets irate about Rapunzel's mumbling. When Rapunzel gets her little attitude and replies, "Did I mumble, Mother?" I can really see the anger in her eyes. I feel like she evolves from a rebellious teenager trying to figure herself out to a young woman confident that her self-doubt was unnecessary. I like that observation, which kind of helps us with thinking about it in terms of a feminist text and not a feminist text.
Well, it started, I don't know if you remember, but I finalized the adoption of my stepdaughters right at the end of last semester. And so it started as, like I was thinking about that, like, she's kind of like the wicked stepmother type figure, but and then I taught what we call aha moments in my 7th grade reading class the other day, and I actually used a clip from the movie. And then when I was watching it, I was just like, wow, like I kind of viewed it in a totally different light, just because, of everything we've been talking about in class and reading Zell. And I was just like, wow, like that's when she really kind of came out of her shell, and she's like, oh my gosh, my whole life I've been questioning everything. And now she's figured it all out.
Isn't that interesting?
And she kind of gets like, she's like, did I mumble? Like, she just has such an attitude about it, and I love it. It's great.
Yeah, it is. It shows that turning point for her in some ways. What about, do we have any kind of turning point like that in Zell?
She realized that her mom has pretty much kept her a prisoner.
Except for the fact that she still waffles back and forth, because even then, at the very end, she's like, "But you can come with us," and obviously, Mama Dearest is not going with that.
Reference to? What's that reference to, Mommy Dearest? Do you know? Joan Crawford and especially the story of the hangers.
No
wire
hangers.
No wired hangers. Yes. See, you were being intertextual and didn't even know it.
Yeah.
Because we are intertextual human beings. That's what a human being is. We're just created from other texts. Michael writes, now this one really got to me. Watching Room and a documentary on Elizabeth Smart. Do you know who Elizabeth Smart is?
That gal who was kidnapped. That kidnapper is getting out of prison like 5 years early now.
Yeah.
After this whole snafu or something, and the courts didn't give her time served.
Watching Room and a documentary on Elizabeth Smart gave me an almost disgusted feel about the idea of locking up a child for your own pleasure. Now, while it is true that each of the characters get out, it does not change the idea that it is an existence that is so limited and free of human contact that it breaks my heart. It hurts me right now. There is likely a real person who is being held against their will and will be for years. We will not know about them for many years, but right now as I write this and you read it, they are suffering. It makes it hard to enjoy the story of Rapunzel, Zell, or Tangled. What an interesting, I hadn't thought of that. But that's a really fabulous instance of how an incident changes the way we look at a text. So Kirsty, with you and the aha moment and the adoption of your stepdaughters, and with Michael, this moment of I've been watching these things and they're terrible and deeply moving. And then I'm reading about Zell, and then I'm reading a picture book that that puts Zell in this. It's done in a Renaissance. It conveys a sense of the Renaissance in it, and everybody's beautiful, and then Zell gives us that more complicated notion of what it might be to be locked up and to be the one who's doing the locking up. So yeah, one moment can change our perception about everything.
For me, with the exception of Tangled, I never didn't see that double negative. But anyway, I saw in even in the picture book and Zell in particular, it was always fairly horrific setup. I mean, it kind of took a darker turn, right? There was sort of a downward spiral in the book, but even in the picture book, which I brought, we can take a look at.
Yes, I brought mine too.
Else bought it.
Yay!
Some of the pictures of the sorceress, I mean, she's scary.
Terrifying.
She's like crazy,
She's
freaky looking.
terrifying.
Right? This is not a.
It is. She looks like.
She's like a deranged woman.
This one in particular is one.
Yeah, and the one where she's cutting her hair.
Yes.
That was the one that kind of sticks out, and even the one where she's in the garden when the husband comes over. Yeah. Yeah, she's a mad woman.
Okay. Yeah.
Right? That's scary stuff.
Yeah, that's exactly what I want to look at.
But look, well, I think it's so weird that it's a children's book. Like, I wouldn't be reading this to my child, this crazed looking woman.
It's an ironic text, though, in some ways. Just like, sometimes we think about poetry as being about beautiful things, but then you get a hold of a poem that is really awful, put into the form of a beautiful thing. So we've got all of this gorgeous artistry occurring in here, talking about a most terrible thing. A couple of most terrible things. Yeah,
And the story, I mean, the way that he wrote the story followed very much the traditional, but the pictures themselves are what's so impactful about this book in particular.
Yeah.
The art really tells more of a story than the words almost.
Oh, yeah. And then, of course, she's pushing him out of the tower. How's he going to survive that? He wouldn't survive that. But magically he does, because it's a fairy tale. Or folk tale. It's hard to tell sometimes which one's which.
And I will never be able to scrub from my brain the image from that Shelley Duvall thing where when he fell from the tower and he had like that pink foam shooting out of his eyes.
Yeah,
I don't
that's
know
gonna
what
be
they were
with you
thinking,
forever.
but that's gonna stick with me.
Well, it was the 80s. You know, it was the 80s. What can we say?
It was awesome.
Danielle, one thing that I would like to discuss further and a possible paper topic is the role of magic in the story. The original Rapunzel tells us that Mother Goethel, is that how you say it? Goethel is a witch or a fairy, but we never see her using her powers. In Tangled, Rapunzel is the magical one, which I again think is really cool and helps to add to the girl power feeling of Tangled because of the magic flower that helped to bring her into the world. In Zell, Mother is the magical one, and she offers a chance of magic powers to Zell, but at the cost of her soul. So, yeah, that use of magic in this particular way, and who uses it, who doesn't, how do they get it, what do they do with it? Good questions to ask, I think, of something like this, especially when you have, how's it in the Grimm Tale? Does it mention magic?
In the later version, it calls her a sorceress, but beyond that, I don't recall that she actually did any magic in this.
I don't either. So the one who has that magic in the Grimm Tale is, it's there, but we don't see it. Although the Rapunzel is enchanted in some way. Isn't that the case in the fairy tale? Are you looking that up now?
I'm looking at it.
Or
What's
is
the
she-
question?
Does she
Like,
show any like enchantment or?
not in the first one. They just call her a fairy, but I haven't seen anything that's fairy-like.
That was in the earlier version, right? The earlier one, she was the fairy, and then they changed it to sorceress. And that's it.
In one of them, doesn't she make the thorns grow so that the prince is blinded? Thought it's
That was in Zell.
Yeah. That was
Like
in
she's
Zell.
falling out of the tower and like thorns or thistles like
Well,
catch
isn't that
him.
one of the stories?
But I thought in one of the fairy tales it said like she
She
makes
made
these-
like the welts
This is-
appear on the father or something, or was that Zell too?
That's Zell.
That was
Okay.
too many Rapunzels. Like
Too
get
many.
them all mixed up.
There's like, yeah, it's a lot.
I don't see anything just glancing through.
Mhm. So I think that's a pretty interesting topic and something that would work. You might not get your 8 to 10 pages out of that. So be thinking about how else you might work that. Because magic is power. And power is fluid. We kind of tend to think of it as this person has it and this person doesn't. When in reality, it is very fluid and moves from one person, one entity, one institution to another person, entity, or institution quite rapidly. And actually, Jacques Foucault is one who talks about power and how it works and how it is, how fluid it is. I think Roberta Seelinger talks, I know she does, talks about Foucault in Disturbing the Universe and that notion of power and how it works and when one has it and doesn't, negotiating and that kind of thing. So that's something to think about again. So look at Roberta Seelinger Trites. It's available through our library. It's an ebook in our library, and do a search for Foucault and it will say something about power. So hopefully that will help you, Danielle. This is so cool I know Danielle's not here and we've never seen her really, except for one picture, but here we get to talk to her. Thomas. I agree that Zell had some Gothic features. present in the narrative. I enjoyed the alternating. Now remember, I think it was Thomas who last time talked about Secret Garden being Gothic and thinking about it in terms of Jane Eyre and what's the other one? Wuthering Heights. I enjoyed the alternating perspectives of the tale, especially Mother's first-person account of her side of the tale. This is a feature of writing that I enjoy in the novels I read. So, and I just wanted to remind myself this, the irony of narration and first-person narration. So Mike Cadden has an article. It's become a cornerstone, although it's not, somebody needs to update it and challenge it a little bit. It's called The Irony of Narration. And in it, he talks about the voice that comes through in adolescent and young adult literature, how it sounds authentic, and how it demonstrates a lot of times the role of first person narration and how it potentially impacts a reader. But of course, all of it's written by an adult. So there's the irony. It's this adult trying to convey something through the voice and mouth of an adolescent or young adult, but it's the adult doing it with an agenda. So it looks like the adolescent or young adult has the agenda, it's the author's agenda. And that could be whether it might be the agenda might be to provide multiple perspectives. So in Chocolate War, you've got, 13 different narrators, I think, in it. And giving these different perspectives, but they're all coming from one author. Of course, he's talented. Cormier was very talented to be able to do that, because one has to be able to put, in his case, himself in these different subject positions to convey what other perspectives might exist. But first-person narration is unreliable. You can have a first-person narrator like Kinney, who is naive, a child who supposedly doesn't know these things, the things that are going on, even though we know that he knows a lot more than we might think he could know, but it doesn't matter. That's what he knows, and we all know some smart kids. I'm pretty sure of that. They can, in Catcher in the Rye, what's his name? Yeah, I just try to block that book because I really don't like it. And here's just an interesting tidbit. I was taking a class with Roberta Silinger Trites during my doctoral work at this time, and we had to read it for a Thursday class, 9/11, that day. And I watched those planes fly into the towers time after time after time, and I'm finishing up Catcher in the Rye. And he seemed just so petulant and useless in the context of larger things. So that probably is one of the things that affected my reading, although I didn't like Holden in the first place. Never did. But you know what? He wasn't written. It was never meant necessarily to be an adolescent or young adult novel. Just kids saw things in it that they identified with and adopted it. They called it their own. Were you going to say something?
Yeah, I have a lot to say about Catcher in the Rye, but that's another discussion.
Lead us astray. It's a movie, isn't it?
I've never seen the movie, but I really liked the book. I mean, I agree with you in the assessment of the character. I thought it was very well done, and I can completely see there are a lot of good reasons why I think it caught on with people at the time. The style itself. Yeah, she's just an angry.
The angst is all there, all teenage.
And I thought for sure, reading it for the first time, I thought for sure this was not going to end right. He was going to do himself in. I thought for sure this is heading for some kind of very dark kind of, self-annihilation kind of ending. So I was surprised.
No.
At the end.
Well, he's not a reliable narrator. He tells us he lies constantly, and he does. So a lying narrator can't be trusted. And there are reasons for having those kinds of narrators. Absolutely, in all of this. They serve a narrative purpose and advance the plot in particular ways. Maybe mentally unstable, which Holden is.
Mhm.
I actually wrote a paper on how he is more than likely bipolar.
Yeah, I guess you could probably so. And this is him recounting a story, this portion of his life for his shrink, right?
Yeah.
His shrink has told him to write it all down. And I say shrink because I can never remember the difference between psychiatrist and psychologist. Maybe one of these days I'll make room in my head to remember that. But so all of this is recounted. All of the conversations are recounted for memory. Memory is the most unreliable thing we have. Oh yeah. Man, the things I think I remember right, I am so wrong so much of the time. So first person narrator has an agenda, and almost all novels have some kind of agenda, but you have to look at what kind of agenda. So with Watson's Go to Birmingham, the agenda is to enlighten, to a couple of agendas probably, to enlighten readers about civil rights movement and to enlighten readers to get them to move away from separation, division regarding race and ethnicity, that it's irrelevant, because that's one of the things that I think comes through very clearly. And the other agenda is to inspire, I guess. So there's at least 3 in that novel. Now you could read a novel that would, if you were looking at a novel out of the 50s, the agenda, although it might not necessarily be, the author might not have been aware of that agenda, is to perpetuate certain ideologies, like where the woman belongs and how children should behave and those kinds of things. So there's always an agenda. If you have a first person narrator, sometimes it's hard to see the agenda, or sometimes it's really easy, but just in any kind of form of narration. So let's see, unreliable narrator. So we've got the lies, naive, agenda, unaware, uninformed. So that the first person narrator never knows the entire story. We might know the entire story, but the first person narrator doesn't. So you get some ideas there about how first person narration works and the irony of narration, that adults write this stuff. Zelensky. Oh no, I've got to bend down. It's a long ways down. Zelensky illustrated this, which is like writing it. Napoli wrote Zell. She has, she's that adult, and she's giving us some insights on perhaps somebody who's not mentally well, 2 people who aren't mentally well, maybe even 3 with the prince as he
I think they're all
descends.
mentally ill.
Yeah. She's actually pretty good at doing that. So just some comments on first person narration. And then Misty, however, all the Rapunzel tales truly imply a sense. Misty has talked about a whole bunch of different Rapunzel versions. There are several short films, I think, and cartoons and such.
She brought up Barbie Rapunzel.
Yeah, and I don't.
Which was.
Is it hideous? Should we look at it?
It was tough.
Yes.
All right.
Oh, guys. No,
Sorry.
I tried to leave it behind.
You could see it.
There was-
You could see what she wrote.
No, I couldn't see what she wrote. I did Barbie Rapunzel. If you want to go look at what she wrote, that sounds good to me. I thought you were going to bring up Barbie Rapunzel.
I am.
We're gonna have to watch that. Oh, all right. Because my fears are coming true.
Barbie, starring in Barbie as Rapunzel.
Awful. I've watched this 100 times.
Me too. I
It's
know.
awful.
It's terrible.
Why did you watch it 100 times?
I have a daughter.
It's,
And we went through the whole Barbie movie phase, all of them.
Barbie as Rapunzel.
I mean, you can just tell from that about.
Thank you, Misty, for bringing that up. But
Soar with Paw Patrol and all new Top Wing Rescues. All this week at 12/11 Central on Nickelodeon.
Ooh, Paw Patrol.
Go Barbie.
Go Barbie. That's right. Go away, Barbie. I loved my Barbie dolls. So thoughts on that? Fulfillment and a sense of longing for something more.
Was anybody really fulfilled?
I don't know.
They were looking for fulfillment in each other.
Well, and the
Misdirected fulfillment? Maybe?
the sorceress or the mother looking for fulfillment and having the child, right? In the book, it was very well done, I thought. You know, she was barren, wanted a child, couldn't have one, seeking fulfillment and possessing.
I think you could say it was
Rapunzel,
any of the three main characters though, because the prince was looking for fulfillment in Rapunzel, and Rapunzel was looking for fulfillment outside of the tower. Like everybody is looking for some kind of something that they don't have.
And you know what? The goose is the one who is fulfilled. Doesn't care that it's sitting on rocks. Actually, maybe that's the way to go, because, you know, all those little geese chasing after her.
Yeah, right. Not much to lose, right?
Exactly.
Of course, nothing ventured, nothing gained. as they say.
Yeah, the goose in Zell may be the only one that's fulfilled. But she wouldn't be, culturally speaking, because she's just sitting on some rocks and being barren. Kirsty, what are you smiling about?
The way you said, because she's just sitting on some rocks. Poor goose. She doesn't even know what she's missing.
Yeah, but ignorance is bliss.
I guess so.
She's so scarred that she's like not doing that again. One and done.
The Zelensky text is a Caldecott Gold. Caldecots are awarded yearly. There's silver and there's gold to picture books that are outstanding in some way or another. And Zelensky's illustrations they're pretty stunning, incredibly artistic. And this is not the first fairy tale that's been reinterpreted through illustration. I think that's won Caldecott Award. Let me do a real quick look. Started awarding it in 1938. Eve Bunting, Smoky Nights, Where the Wild Things Are.
Mhm.
Now, hold it, was that a 1964? There it is. Wolf in the Snow, Jumanji. So You Want to Be President, The Little House. It's in black and white. Golem, that's a Jewish myth. Oh, this reminds me, when we were talking about different perspectives and not paying attention or not thinking things through, the Noah's Ark always fascinated me as a kid, and all that rain and how they got all the animals on the boat and what they did for those 40 days and 40 nights. There is an adaptation or a transformation of that Bible story. Can't remember what the name of it is, but in that novel, there's a young girl who talks about how awful it was shoveling crap out of the boat day after day after day, smelling those nasty animals day after day after day. I didn't think of that. That was the last thing that occurred to me. It's just cool thinking about them walking down the plank 2 by 2.
I also thought about how they grab 2 of each kind, but they're all going to be inbred.
There is that. And then on top of that,
I thought about how
Yes.
we could have just left the mosquitoes out.
West Nile. West Nile, here we come. And then on top of that, think about as the rain comes, and the waters rise and rise and rise. And there they are on their ark, and people are drowning all around them. And they
Did you
can't
see
get them
Noah?
up. Does it show that?
My wife and I both liked it. I thought it was pretty good. It's Russell Crowe plays Noah.
Uh-huh.
And it was pretty well done cinematically speaking, I thought. Did any of you guys see it? No?
Bits and pieces.
I watched it, but I did not like it.
You didn't like it?
No, I guess because, that's a Bible story I've been told my whole life, and that was just a very dark side of it. I think
It was Yeah, it was a different interpretation. Actually, it's quite apropos for our conversation as far as transformation is concerned. I mean, it was a very different look at the story.
Mm-hmm. And how that story has grown, how it's not that long of a story in the Bible, but it has taken on these mythic, iconic characteristics. So yeah,
I feel like in the Bible, like Noah's the good guy, and in the movie, like he's not that great of a guy.
He's not that great of a guy, I think, in the Bible either, because isn't he a drunk?
Yeah, Noah's not that great of a guy in the Bible either.
In the story of the ark, I guess I should say, not in the Bible, but in that specific story, you're not. My little 3-year-old self was not told Noah's an alcoholic.
That's right. Or that
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, in regards to Noah and the ark, why Noah chose to build the ark and all of that, in comparison to the movie Noah, like in the movie, I just feel like it's so dark and like I'm a chicken anyway. I can't watch Law and Order by myself. Like,
you're cracking me up. Don't watch The Alienist. Whew, that'll send you.
Criminal Minds at night.
Yeah, Criminal Minds at night.
No, I'm like literally watching Paw Patrol with my 7-year-old. Like.
You crack me up, Christy. Okay, fabulous. Do I watch anything that's light? I don't think so.
I just watch a lot of stuff with dark humor.
Yeah, I can go with that frequently. So I did what I wanted to bring that up. Did anybody have anything they wanted to say about this gorgeous edition of Rapunzel? when, is it Michael who was talking about the Gothic? This almost has a Gothic feel as well, although it's Renaissance. It reflects Renaissance imagery.
The Italian
Renaissance, yeah.
I love how just pretty and like light it is compared to what the story is.
Yeah.
Like there's some
A really ugly story contained in some really pretty pictures.
Except for the crazy sorceress woman. She's a mad woman.
And I'm
Clearly,
just
every
like,
time
I'm
you see her.
sorry,
in
if my mom looked
those
like that, I would immediately suspect that she was evil.
Something wrong.
I'd be like, my mom doesn't look like everyone else who's really nice. What's going on around here?
Yeah, and you get the image at the beginning of, the image is that of the father, that Rapunzel's mother and father together, and he's touching her stomach because she's preggers. And then you get this when they decide to marry, and then at the end, when the perfect family, well, and before that,
The art looks very Da Vinci inspired.
with that, and the pictures of them together.
Notice, like, when the prince comes into the picture, this cat is in all of those pictures.
The cat is in them before that, too.
Was it in there before that? I was just noticing, like, every.
Well, she is, it
picture
is
after
there
that.
on the cover.
Oh, yeah.
That's one of the things that illustrators tend to do, is they'll put these little, some kind of something in a picture book, and it'll be in all those pictures. So the Anthony Brown with the red ball of Hansel and Gretel, it's in all of the images in some form or another. It's a pretty popular technique that illustrators use. It's kind of a secret. It's kind of a joke on everybody. Oh, I'm just looking. There might not be any pictures of her without him. No, there's the cat. So yeah.
Oh, yeah. Look at the cats even afraid.
Cats.
Sad woman.
Cats aren't afraid of anything. Cats are mad themselves.
The look on her face the first time that he gets in the tower is hilarious. Like, she's just like, what are you doing here? And then the very next page, they're, oh, we're in love. Just kidding.
She looks angry, actually.
Affronted.
Yeah, he comes barging in.
Yeah, yeah.
She's like, what are you doing in my swamp? That's all I can think of.
Heaven preserve me, cried Rapunzel when the prince stepped through her window.
It's very presumptuous. Just walk into someone's window.
Yeah, especially because you climb up her.
Okay, so she didn't recognize that was not
her
mother's voice calling for her to toss down her hair.
Maybe he's a ventriloquist.
I guess.
Practice.
It's probably more a conditioned response to just hearing Rapunzel down your long hair.
Yeah, probably
Did
so.
anybody else notice that this guy looks very like biblical?
And he's wearing
Yes.
what from the Last Supper.
Yeah.
Yes, that's what it is.
Yeah.
That's it.
Same outfit, yeah.
But then like he doesn't look like that the rest of the time. He's back in his like traditional Renaissance-y type clothes.
That's
The only time that you see
interesting.
him that way is on page 1.
So what does that suggest?
Is it irony?
That
Is he the one that
biblical
goes and
imagery. I don't
You
know.
know, something just occurs to me about this book too, though, is when you said that he goes and steals this Rapunzel out of the garden again. This version of the story did a really striking job of getting across how desperately this woman wanted that Rapunzel, that lettuce. I mean, she was like, in this story, she was like sick. she was like pale, and how does it describe her? I'm gonna have to pull it out. And look
Well,
at
it was like
It
withdrawal.
was like,
Pale and
yeah,
drug
I mean,
withdrawal.
she was like a drug addict for this stuff, right? And she wanted it bad enough to make him, to convince him to go steal it to begin with. And then when she had it,
Pale and wretched.
pale and wretched, right?
Yeah.
One
Like,
day-
I think that you should lay off the Rapunzel,
You know what?
right?
If all Rapunzel tastes that good.
One day, as the wife sat by the window, her eyes fixed on a bed of Rapunzel, the herb looked so luxuriant, so green and thick and fresh, that she felt a terrible longing to taste it. Day after day, her craving grew until she began to suffer from it. She became pale and wretched and said to her husband, "If I cannot eat some of the Rapunzel from the garden behind the house, I'm going to die." Her husband was alarmed to hear such desperate words. He loved his wife dearly and saw no choice but to bring her some of the Rapunzel. 10 times, 20 times he circled the garden wall, but found neither door nor gate.
I know. Did you see her
And it
face?
says,
when
yeah,
I
and then-
hunger. Lettuce?
And then yet the next day her craving for Rapunzel was even fiercer than before. I mean, she's like,
And pregnancy cravings, though.
yeah. That's true.
I remember my mom saying it was awful.
I mean, the woman's face whenever she finally has the Rapunzel too. She's just like,
It looks like she just got a
Orgasmic.
Yes.
Did you want, yeah, I was gonna, you're crazy.
And look at how she looms over him too.
like she's just gonna box his ears or something.
Well, and we get the same impression about how she's going to treat the
Quite
prince.
ominous. I mean,
Oh yeah.
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 It's almost the same pose that if she would have shoved him out the window already. Like she's already
Yeah.
kind of assumed. Yeah.
All right. So I think that wraps it up for Zell and all of that, unless somebody has something else they want to offer and that they've been sitting on and just can't wait to talk about it, because I'd love to hear it. What an,
I liked how Zell is Zell and Tangled, Mother Gothel and Tangled doesn't really care anything about Rapunzel. You just see her always like kissing and caressing her hair. But in Zell, she actually does like love Rapunzel in her own really messed up way.
yes, and I can't remember who said it on the online discussion board that in Entangled, it's all about the hair.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about,
magical entangled too, you know. like-
well, that's true. That's true.
Yeah.
And it restores the mother's youth. Right?
Yeah. Right. And so for very good reason.
She's getting
I forgot that.
something out
I
of
do
it
still
that
think
she
it's
didn't get out
interesting,
of the other
Especially because, like, in a
stories.
lot of the other stories, it doesn't seem like the mother really doesn't love Rapunzel as much as in Zell. It comes off as like how much she just adores her.
Well, how much you
child.
sacrificed for her
Yeah.
and just like.
I mean, if you didn't love your kid after doing that, you did something wrong.
So, like, when we discussed, I think it was, I don't know, it wasn't in this class, maybe it was last fall, we talked about the mothers, the good mother,
Hmm.
good enough mother, and the bad mother.
Mm-hmm.
Was the mother in Zell, I mean, she has all the qualities of a good mother, right? She's willing to sacrifice herself and.
Taken to the end.
herself and-
Yeah. But she's also willing to sacrifice Zell,
Right.
which is something that kind of mother would not do.
Motherhood was just really, it's really interesting to look at it in that, and then I'm into Wicked as well, and looking at motherhood in that novel as well.
You should probably bring that up about mothers and mothering. There's some pretty interesting theories on it.
I think
In
like,
terms-
because we
Go
all
ahead.
come from like different, my mothering story is like very rare and different. You know what I mean? Everybody just comes to the text with such a different perspective, and even dads come. So I think it's just really interesting to show like you were saying, and you know, somebody was saying in class, the differences in that.
I agree. Yeah. And I'm thinking too, culturally, about the ideological shift with what happens in Tangled and her obsession with the hair and not Zell. Because what does it say that this is about her wanting to stay young. That's not what comes out of anything else. So that has been truly transformed to reflect the glory of youth, the desire for youth.
And the lengths that people would go to stay eternally youthful.
Yes.
Well, and I'm just wondering, is that like because that's an easier concept for children to understand than the complexity of like the novel? Like my 8-year-old's gonna understand people don't want to get old. You know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
But she's not gonna understand like anything in Zell.
It's also probably adding that bit more of fantasy to it that's more interesting to children than just watching, like in Zell, like how she has a way with the plants and stuff. I mean, that's interesting, but I remember when I was a kid, I probably wouldn't have been as interested in glowing hair that heals people.
Oh, glowing anything.
Yeah. Shiny.
Give me some shiny, sparkly things. I want those.
Yeah.
In case you couldn't tell in previous. Yeah, I don't know.
In Tangled, you have like a clear cut good and evil.
Yes.
And children, especially, are going to better understand that binary of good and evil.
Well,
versus in Zell, where we all said. Like,
except doesn't that just perpetuate
that
the easiness
black and white.
of black and white?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not saying it's a good thing.
Yeah.
I'm saying it's what in children's.
Yeah, because
more. Whereas in like Zell, we all said like, yeah, we think what the mother did is awful, but she's also this kind of sympathetic character, and the lines are very blurred as to who is really the bad guy in that story. So
obviously.
Well, and we see a whole other side when in Zell because she's like crazy. She goes crazy in the tower.
well, I'm guessing an 8-year-old probably isn't going to read Zell. I don't know. Maybe. I might have. My
8-year-old certainly isn't. I was reading some of it out loud to like my 7th graders because I always talk to them about what I'm reading. And I have like a reading wall or whatever. And so they were like, read some of it. And I would start reading and they'd be like, okay, got to skip that paragraph. And then
next.
And they were like, why do you keep stopping, miss? Why do you keep stopping? I'm like, oh, you don't need to know that part.
Exactly. Another time. Don't even talk about this.
As far as the parts that you would skip over for a younger audience, there is a scene in here that occurs to me when she says that. With the first time that the prince comes up into the tower, and I'm gonna have to find the reference to the description. Feel free to go on. I'll try and find this, and I'll bring this. Bring it
back to us, even if we're on something else.
Yeah, I thought it was done fairly well, and I kind of shook my head. I was like, this is so overt. But
what happens?
It was when it was the way. Let me try and find this page because I'm not going to do it justice. I have to find. I'm not going to do it justice. I'm going to say something that will make me grievously embarrassed.
In this class?
I know. This is a pretty open room, but I'll just say.
Okay.
Oh, here. So I just made a note. There are many allusions that spring from the garden itself, right? And even kind of
gardens and fertility.
A concept of this conversation we had, Secret Garden. So there are many allusions that spring from the garden itself, implying that Zell is something kind of grown from the earth almost, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then there's this sex scene. I put air quotes around sex scenes for those of you online. Let's see, page 195 and 196. No, Spence is killing you now.
Me too.
You agree.
Oh, wait.
Can't be that far.
Page 180. Sorry, I have all kinds of notes in here. Okay, so chapter 25, it's page 180, if you have this paperback version. Conrad is insatiable. Hands press along Zelle's hairline and temples, around the shells of her ears. They follow the crest of her throat and circle the thin stalk of her neck, ever knowing. He undresses her with trembling insistence. His mouth finds her perfect. He believes he tastes the heady maturity of ripe plums, the bitter edge of small, round lettuce leaves, the sweetness of fresh milk. It's like all these versions, particularly the lettuce leaves. Okay, we all know what's being talked about there, but it's kind of this allusion back to the garden, and that the mother ate the Rapunzel, which was the lettuce, and that she kind of grew from that, and she became that, and it's a part of what she became, right? Right, it's all this, kind of these allusions that kind of nod back to the garden.
Exactly.
It's very Song of Solomon too, like if you're talking about.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah.
Your hair was like a flock of goats.
Yeah.
I mean, who ever heard anything so romantic?
Yeah.
But you're right. Some of that stuff in Song of Solomon
What
is
is
a little
about, like,
clunky for
nose
my
the
mind.
tower or something, like.
But you get it. It was a different
Yeah.
time. There was, totally.
Yeah, I definitely didn't read that part out loud.
Hey kids, what do you think about this?
I don't even
God.
know if they would have I don't think they'd understand it, but I didn't want to take the chance. It was my creative.
Yeah,
You're right.
something.
Admin would come and write about this. And, like,
Principal.
be like,
Hey.
Sandy, and
Hey.
I just
We were just talking about horticulture. I don't know what you're talking about.
Talking about
Gardens.
Gardens.
gardening club.
Oh my.
With plums and lettuce. Cherries, whatever. My lovely edition now of Oz.
These pictures of your book. Is this your edition?
This is
Your personal
mine.
edition?
And I'm going to show you something very cool about this. Here it is. Upside down. Which is the cover that you see there. Should be. And if I go to the back page, back cover, I have here,
What?
Oh, that's
No
cool.
way.
and everybody turns green.
Awesome.
What do you think?
That's cool.
Isn't that cool? I bought this a long time ago, and I when I saw it, I could not possibly resist it, as you might guess. I can't believe I've had it all these years and still haven't lost the glasses, which means now I'm going to lose the
You
glasses.
better knock on wood.
Can't just say stuff like that.
So, The Wizard of Oz, this is illustrated by Elizabeth Zwerger in a 1996. The whole book is contained in this. The print is,
Oh wow.
Very tiny.
Microscopic.
but big, big pages.
Yeah.
So it's like 4 pages to, well, I don't know how it would work out. So here's an image of the cyclone. The scarecrow. Of what?
Of
With the
movie
cow
Flipper.
flying through the air. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, okay. And I have to confess, okay, here's the scarecrow. I have to confess, every time, because I listened to it, every time he started saying something about a pole stuck up his, I just replaced back with ass. I couldn't help it. I just couldn't help it. But there you have the scarecrow. And there are the house lands.
And the Puritans are there.
The Puritans with their ruffle necks. And that's the witch in the white. The Tin Woodman. The lion.
Much better than the movie version.
Yeah. Fleeing the Kalidas.
All right. That's some 80s laser or something happening there too.
Maybe their tongues?
Too much heroin. Get it? Yeah. Curran's made from poppies. Had to say it. Can you see me now? This is where they get their green glasses. And that's an eye chart. Kind of.
So not a very good eye chart.
Maybe with the green goggles on, it knocks out the green letters.
Maybe. The disembodied head.
Oh, wow.
And here we have Puritans, Pilgrims, something. The Witch and the Wolves.
Interesting. Very.
The Winged Monkeys, dropping him off. Oops. That's not fly, it should be Winged Monkeys. But then the turnaround with them helping. Here we have our humbug uncovered.
He has perfect humbug hair.
He does.
Doesn't he though?
And his pants pulled up to his chest.
That's correct. This is when he's figuring out how to give a heart to the Tin Woodman. That's creepy. But I love these illustrations. I love them. They're beautiful. And they're more. I just took the big ones. There are little ones throughout.
It's a little reminiscent of maybe Tim Burton a little bit.
Oh, uh-huh.
Like a lighter Tim Burton.
Yeah.
Just the shapes.
Yeah.
And here we have China Country. This is a very pleasing picture. And it's because of the roundness. Goodbye, Dorothy. Safe travels. Off you go. And then back home. So this is a home away home story, which is pretty frequent in children's literature. Quite frequently with boys, like in Where the Wild Things Are, where Max sets out, goes to the land of the wild things. I guess we could have done that, but I did anybody see the movie?
I actually haven't.
I did.
You did or didn't?
We're talking about Where the Wild Things Are?
Yes, the movie.
Yes, I saw it.
What'd you think of it?
I really liked it. It was, as everything, it was certainly a little bit darker. Like, it's funny that you brought it up because my kids are 4 and 7, and my 4-year-old really wanted to watch it. And we were like, I think it's a little bit too dark. And it's funny when you have to have those conversations about children's movies, And so we read the book with him. They love the Where the Wild Things Are book. And so it's one of those things of, it is much darker and it's very interesting. It's more like, and I often wonder, are these things made for adults who love these books as kids and therefore not for current children, if that makes sense? Mm-hmm. So yeah, we kind of had that conversation, but it was like, yeah, it's a little bit dark. So I liked it, but of course I saw it as as an adult. So it's hard.
I have a version of it where it's got jazz music to go along with it. It's very sharp, very edgy, and it feels uncomfortable to me.
Right.
I have not seen the film, so I don't know. What was dark about it?
Just everything, like even from just the cinematography, the lighting, everything about it. Like aesthetically, it was very dark. The monsters were quite scary, and And it's funny because, you know, it is like when you read the book, you're like, oh, I could see this being dark and scary, you know, but something about it, it's just obviously more realistic just seeing it in front of you. And I was really drawn to like the music. I still remember the trailers, you know, hearing that song. I can't remember the name of that song now, but anyways, so yeah, I was very drawn to it based off the trailer. But yeah, it's very dark. It was like very little light. Yeah.
Let's just look at that because we can.
Yeah, the trailer is, to me, amazing. Yeah, the movie's very good, but like I said, it's just not one I would show my kids. Yeah. And it's very interesting to me having that, even The Wizard of Oz, like when I watched it for this class, it was like, my husband was like, it's going to give them nightmares. And I was like, what? Yeah. And it's just funny. It's just interesting that you can't show kids these movies.
Boy, but I watched Wizard of Oz from early on. And yes, the winged monkeys terrified me. As did the witch.
Parts of it really
Me too.
watching it as an adult after all these years of not having seen it for a long time. Because you're right, it used to be on. It was like an annual event. Right?
Yes, it was.
Oh yeah, definitely. Like at my house for sure.
Well, that's like
Yeah.
one of the things. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, agreeing with you. I mean, the witch was scary to me. The winged monkey is terrifying.
The lion
And it's-
scared me.
The lion.
And you know, there's some things
You can see that too. I mean,
I really had to fight to get songs out of my head
Oh,
since watching it. They just
like
bombard me.
70% of the movie.
Oh, which ones?
Songs. Oh.
We all live. It just would not stop. It was an earworm that would not stop. And then one of the things that scared me as a kid was when the soldiers are going,
Oh yeah.
which reminded me as when I knew, or when I was older and had been exposed to Russians, the Ruskies, you know. And that music tended to convey that very frightening Russian control.
They use Night on Bald Mountain in that castle scene right there, the song, and I think that's by a Russian composer even.
Well, that makes sense.
Dun, 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 that.
Okay.
And see, whenever I watched it again, like as an adult, I heard that too because I'm a minor in music, and I was like, "What?" And so it was so interesting watching it from this side because I haven't seen it in probably 20 years.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
I was singing along.
You were just talking about being a music major and noticing this. I took stage makeup in undergrad, and the makeup on that film is incredible.
It is.
It is so amazing, the detail. I started researching that and went on this whole rabbit trail, and the details are amazing. Oh my gosh.
Well, and then the Buddy Ebsen thing, that he was originally the Tin Woodman, but he became allergic to the makeup and couldn't and couldn't wear it. So he was out, and he would have been a great Wood Tin Man. All right, here's the Where the Wild Things Are trailer, one of them.
I didn't want to wake you up, but I really want to show you something.
See, I'm not very fond of Max in the book. In fact, like a little brat that I can't stand.
Yeah, I think it's that Secret Garden effect, which Mary, watch it live, it's tolerable.
Can a snotty nose.
Yep.
How interesting. I'm gonna have to take a look at that. Don't be blurry. Is it the same one?
I'm Max. I'm an explorer. I travel by sea. I used to travel by air.
Obviously, you have no home or family.
Well, I have one of those, but...
But you ate them all?
No. I have no plans to eat anybody.
You are now the king, and you will be a truly great king.
Hey, King, what's your first order of business?
It's the Wild Rumpista!
Well, this is our family. I'm Ira. I put the holes in the trees. This is Judith.
You don't really need to know me. Kind of a downer.
That's Alexander.
I hate this tree! Ow! Well, he just wants attention. Don't give him the satisfaction. That's Douglas. I count on him forever.
We'll take care of each other and we'll all sleep together in a real pile.
That looks fast.
Wow. Did you make this?
Yeah, it's gonna be a place where only the things you want to happen would happen.
We can totally build a place like that.
It's all yours. You're the owner of this world.
You're not really a king, huh?
I'll eat you up. I love you so.
I want you to be king forever.
Definitely.
Hey.
Oh, which that's the wrong. Don't feed it. It'll just follow you around.
The trouble with dogs and cats. So that discussion started with the Home Away Home story, where the character goes out and it starts at home. Character goes out and conquers something, the world maybe, and then returns the hero. And for Dorothy, that's one of the big transitions in the film, from the book to the film, is that it never happened. It was all just a dream, which is kind of disappointing. But I guess I understand. But in some ways, it is kind of disappointing, because that shuts off any potential for anything else. And you might know that dozens of books came out. Baum wrote some of them, and then others took up the pen to write these crazy stories, some which are better than others. And so Dorothy comes back to Oz. I can't remember anything about any of those books because there's only so much room in my head for some things, and that's one that goes out. Remember that thing we were talking about, memory? And yeah, it goes. But it's a pretty frequent motif to see in children's literature, not necessarily adolescent or young adult, because in that the function is for men to to start at home and to go out and stay out. For women, it's to stay at home, especially in 19th century texts like Little Women, for instance. Jo can't. She goes out. Does she? Does she live away? Does she I don't know. I can't remember. Anybody?
And Little Women?
Little Women.
Jo was the one that wanted to be a writer, wasn't she?
She is a writer.
She goes off for a while. She does.
And she comes, but she comes back, and she comes back because she has to. That's what the population that would be reading this would expect. Jo is not going to stay out, and she is going to come home and get married. Now she'll go away with her husband, and that's okay. But she's not going to go out and stay out by herself. That's just unacceptable. And in fact, part of the reason, see, it's Little Women, Good Women, no, what's the second part? It's been so long.
Oh, okay.
But there's no conquering going on when there's a girl.
Little Women, Good Wives.
Good Wives.
Little Men, and Jo's Boys.
Yeah. So is it in Good Wives that she marries? She doesn't marry. Does she marry in Little Women?
She does at the end.
Yeah, she marries what's his name?
His professor, the German
tutor.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
I actually haven't learned to do
Spoiler alert.
Oops. Oh no, I've already spoiled it for myself whenever I was reading a different book that said something about the bird dying or something.
Can we, I know we're not on the articles yet, but I found an article, I didn't get to type it, I had a hell of a weekend, I never typed in the discussion, but my article talked about that, the home away.
Oh, really? What did it say?
And it compared, it was so interesting and it was very long and detailed, but it compared all the adaptations, and basically this guy's thesis was, every time you take something and you adapt it, so like they had the novel and they adapted it into a movie, and then they did another adaptation, another one, like these all make this, he calls it the web of adaptations, and they all kind of contradict each other. So he compared the novel to the film that we watched and said Dorothy learns that lesson, right? That home is really already within her, and that the movie shows that by having those characters be the farmhands, that shows that like home was really with her all along. But then it talks about The Wiz, which I did not watch.
I didn't either. I should have had us watch it.
But it was
I
interesting
guess.
to read about it because it talked about it from the perspective of an African American woman, and in that one, she's encouraged to go out and build her own family, and she's afraid to leave home. So Dorothy learns something completely different. She learns that it's safe to go out. And then he brought in Oz the Great and Powerful, which has a male protagonist, and talked about that as well and said he gets the best of both worlds. So he wants to be great, but he learns that his goodness inside of himself is what he needs, but he gets to have both of those things. Whereas Dorothy and all other adaptations, the female has to choose between.
And there are so many adaptations of so many.
I think this guy did, that's why this article was so long, it was almost overwhelming, but I think he compared like 6 different adaptations all in one. And I was like, I haven't seen all of them.
Yeah, and there was a steampunk version of Oz, which was fascinating. I loved it. I can't remember. It was long. It was a series, I think.
Oh, the Steam Engines of Oz, or is that different?
Who?
There was one that was something about, like, I just remember seeing it a long time ago. It was like something about the steam engines of Oz or something like that.
I don't remember.
I think
Yeah, when you find it.
But it was interesting, the gender, essentially the line that I think, I have it pulled up, but he said that was so interesting, was he said the male characters, males get to choose. They get to choose which ones they want, and the female characters have to choose home. Whether it's like even in Wiz, she chooses to build her own home and get married, but it's still very much that domestic return home type of feel. Whereas when they put Oz from a male character's perspective, it's more of like he gets the best of both worlds. He gets to be great and he gets the love interest, and it all works out great for him. He gets everything he ever wanted.
Interesting.
It was a really interesting article. But
and there's this whole series of novels that it's Cinder.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
That does a whole series of
There's also the
Scarlet.
Yeah.
Scarlet
Scarlet
is
Crest is the third one.
and that would be the Rapunzel. Yes.
There's also the Dorothy Must Die series.
Dorothy, yeah, that's what it is, isn't it? Oh no,
The one that you're talking about is the one where they're all cyborgs.
yes, that's right. So that it's the same concept about with Cinderella that no, hold it. What am I thinking of? Which one? Dorothy Must. Yeah, it's Dorothy Must Die that I'm thinking of mostly. Anyway, I've gotten off track on that. But
Is that
yeah,
good? Somebody donated that to my classroom library, and I've never read it.
I'm not crazy about them, but I'm not crazy about fantasy like that. It's okay, and it's a really popular series, but I'm not crazy about it.
Well, in my spare time, I'll have to read it.
Yes, exactly. So that means you're not going to be reading it, huh?
Yes, probably.
Yes, that's code. So I think that's the end of that. Okay, what have we got? Not much time, but we have next week too. So where do we want to start?
I just have one little comment.
Okay.
There was a lot more head chopping and neck snapping than I thought there would be.
So the Tin Woodman, I mean, he's a butcher, right?
Yeah,
I mean, he's
lots
a
of
man.
death.
But he
and so was the lion.
He's so hesitant to step on an ant, but he doesn't think twice to like chop up that one wolf that's just like following his natural instinct and going after a mouse. I was like,
this is so
definitely parts in the book that I felt like were so contradictory to each other. I
They
kept
were-
wanting Dorothy to do something for the flying monkeys to release them.
Yes.
And she's just like, here's the crown, you can be the next slave master. Doesn't even think twice.
I was just so, like, my jaw dropped when the scarecrow was, like, snapping necks of the birds.
Oh yeah.
It's like wholesale slaughter.
Like there's nothing.
I picked up on that too.
Yeah, it's pretty violent all over the place. Because what happens with the lion, that he goes off to eat his meat, to kill and eat the meat, because everybody else is apparently vegan. He doesn't want to offend anybody. They're all eating nuts and berries.
But again, he gets to go off and do that, but Tin Woodman kills the wolf for chasing the mouse. Like,
Yeah.
it was also.
And I think, doesn't the lion eat the wolf?
I don't know.
I can't remember. No?
No.
Right, wolves when the witch sends them.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's when,
Okay.
yeah. But still, like, then I was thinking that as well, like, it's all kind of, the whole thing is a contradiction, because here they all want something, like the lion wants courage, but then he possesses some courage. And the woodman wants a heart, but then he shows kindness.
And doesn't want to step on bugs.
Right, yeah.
And
So-
yeah, and the smarts.
Yeah, the scarecrow,
The
who's
scarecrow.
like basically
He's
the
calling
whole
the shots.
time thinking of a plan out of the trouble that they get in. He's the one that says, okay, well, we can do this, or the Tin Woodman chopped down that tree so that we can get across. Like,
But that was
Yeah.
kind of the point, though, because I mean, even
Huh?
the Oz says, "Well, you are smart. You've
Exactly.
already done this."
Yeah, I agree that's part of what we're supposed to get out of it, that we already possess these characteristics.
But
Don't-
one of the
I think
things in the
that-
film and the book I think is interesting is in the film the characters realize that they already possess those things. But in the book they realize that. They're duped.
They're
Scarecrow
duped.
thinks he has real brains in his head the whole time, and
Mhm.
Timon thinks he has a heart, and all of a sudden the lion thinks he's courageous when they've been this all along, and they never realize it.
Well, yeah, and then it takes somebody like Oz to help them realize that. And he himself is,
A humbug.
yeah. So why it takes him, a humbug, for them to realize that they.
Are you talking about the movie or the
book?
The book.
The book, yeah. So I just thought that was interesting too, how like they don't realize these things until somebody else tells them.
And you were saying that they never find out, or they never
Well,
figure it out.
Yeah, they never figure it out. They, like the Scarecrow, okay, so he puts pins and needles in
Uh-huh.
his head, and nobody ever says to him, hey man, you don't really have a brain, that's pins and
Those
needles
are
in your
pins and
head.
needles.
Like,
You had a brain, you don't need this.
they're
But
like, oh,
he
your
says
brain is so big, it's getting so large.
yeah, so they still
never
live under the delusion and illusion of Oz.
I thought it was
Yes.
an interesting, and maybe just because when we talked about potential paper topics, you talked about the capitalist nature, but I think it does have a big commentary on society, like the constant give and take. Like no one could get something for free. Like
For free.
everybody had
And he
to do
says
something in
that
return.
very
Even
specifically.
Glinda, the good witch, in the very end, when Dorothy wants to go home, she's like, well, I'll tell you how to go home if you give me that crown. And like, yeah, she uses it for good purposes, but it's still like, you have to give and take. Nobody just gets anything.
Right. No
and
freebies here.
Dorothy's like very separate from everyone else in Oz because she seems to be this very pure and kind. I'm Dorothy the meek, and what does she call herself? The meek and small or something. And she's very naive, and she gets what she wants, but I don't think she really fully realizes that either, that she had it all along, you know? I don't know, I feel like they just kind of all ended up being duped along with everybody else and thinking Oz is still great and powerful.
Mhm.
They never see him for what he really is.
Yeah, and that's where that man behind the curtain thing comes from. Wait, if you hear that phrasing, that's precisely where it comes from. How many of you have the one that's illustrated? Which it's
I have,
beautifully illustrated. So you've got these.
Mine doesn't have color. It has the
but-
original illustrations, but
yeah.
it's there in black and white.
Yeah, mine are in black and white too.
Maybe there's printer out the book. Yeah, mine are just.
Yeah.
But
and the-
those are the original illustrations that were with the book.
And
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that one's much.
that's when
more
they're
interesting.
in Oz.
What years was
Or,
that?
I mean, the Emerald City of Oz. Yeah, that's what we're talking about.
Yeah, no, mine are colored.
And then, so we've got red,
Oh, that's so cool.
there's green,
Was it blue at the beginning? Or blue, whatever she meant.
it's red and golden and red and golden and red and green and a different green.
Mine has a lot of green,
Yeah, there is a lot of green.
like even in the beginning.
Yeah.
They probably did that though because Kansas was described as so gray. That they probably put a lot of green to show its vibrancy.
Oh, yeah, I think so. Now, I don't know when the color got added to it.
So in the article that I read, when Baum and Denslow, the
Denslow.
illustrator, were collaborating, they collaborated on the book. They actually paid out of their own pockets for the color prints to be included in the first edition of the book.
Interesting.
So they talked about that was kind of it was a collaborative effort to present the book in terms of the colors that they proceed through. And the publisher didn't want to do it because it cost too much. So they ended up paying out of their own pocket to have those color illustrations.
I'm so glad they did. I'm so glad they did because it's gorgeous.
feel like the Scarecrow looks really creepy without his hat.
Let's see.
And that one where I don't know if y'all can see this on my.
We can, yes. So it's the stork. Oh,
Yeah, when the stork
I
is.
dated a guy that looked like that. Sorry. Not for long. I'm kidding. The Scarecrow's, still has a Tin Woodman on the next page. Kind of that, with that round head of his.
It's just weird.
Yes, it is. And I want to draw your attention to something that is kind of odd that's been happening in everything that we've seen, or not everything, but a lot of the things that we've seen. So we have in the film Wizard of Oz, The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, the farmhands end up as the lion, the Tin Woodman, whichever he is, and the Scarecrow. In the Shelley, what's her face? Duvall, the Shelley Duvall version of Rapunzel, the mother and father end up being Rapunzel and the prince.
Peter Pan adaptations have a history of doing that too, with like the father and Captain Hook being the same.
That's right. That's right.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a pretty common, and that's Freudian all the way, or it can be analyzed in Freudian terms about this desire for the mother, desire for the father, Electra complex, Oedipus complex, those kinds of things getting all mixed up with these characters and how they're trading it off. Now, we could say perhaps that they just didn't want to bring in other actors, but I don't think so.
Yeah,
I think
were being cheap.
they're just, yeah. They didn't want to have somebody else to play, Jeff Bridges to compete with him. I just wanted to bring your attention to that because I think it's significant in some way or another that this happens. And it happens more often than we probably know. I'm trying to think of other things.
Jumanji, the first one.
Does that happen?
Yes, his dad.
The dad.
Okay. So yeah, it does happen. There's an article in there. There's certainly a paper in there. I don't know what, but there's something there. Okay, so when you came back to the film after either not seeing it or not seeing it for a really long time, what was your reaction this time around?
One of the things that the article I read pointed out, it talked about Miss Gulch, that was her name?
Mhm.
Okay, so it talked about her and how she comes across as this very angry, grumpy woman. She's hostile when she's mad, and that's kind of all that we really see is that side of her, but she should be commended for trying to grow a garden, a colorful garden in this desolate Kansas. And so she's really the only character that's trying to bring the color from Oz to Kansas.
Interesting.
Yes. So instead of viewing her as this grumpy, evil character, she's a really good person, and there's nothing wrong with her trying to defend her garden. And she's mad that Toto bit her.
He bit her.
Yeah. So she's angry. So anybody would be mad at that. But when I watched it when I was a kid, I was like, oh, she's so mean.
And she's made to. We're supposed to see her as mean because she has sharp features and that voice.
No.
That. Yeah.
Get you, my little pretty.
That's pretty good, isn't it?
Well, and the thing too, at the end of the movie, that is not resolved. like Dorothy's back. She wakes up. Toto is still running around. Like the dog is still getting taken away. Like that didn't just resolve itself because a cyclone came and Dorothy woke up.
Mm-hmm.
So that to me at the end, I was just like.
So we could say that The Wonderful Wizard of Oz in itself, the text, is a very conflicted text. And it's also a conflicted film. Especially, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. The article that I read talked about the conflictions in the film as well, and it said one of the things is Judy Garland's character sings "Somewhere Over the Rainbow," and that's like the memorable thing, and that's talking about wanting to leave and go away from home and the dreams of getting out. But in the end, she realizes home is her place and home is where she should be, and those two are almost contradictory. Like, we just are supposed to, like.
What do you want? Do you want to leave or do you want to stay?
The author said we're just supposed to assume she changes her mind and decides if she wants to stay.
It could be one of those things, though, too, that you don't realize what you have until you've lost it.
Yeah, I was going to say, that kind of comes like she hasn't learned her lesson yet.
Right. So when she wants to go home, it was not, like, I was describing it to someone recently going, it's about, the grass really isn't greener on the other side of the fence. It's
in Oz.
Well,
true,
grass is pretty green enough.
Figuratively.
But that's kind of the lesson that I see that she takes from it, especially in the movie when she wants to go home so badly, you know.
But did she really want to go home badly in the movie, or did she just want to go check and make sure that Auntie M was okay? That's the only way that the professor convinced her to even head back home in the first place. It wasn't that she was missing home, unless you are talking about home as family.
Mm-hmm.
I equate home as family in my personal life, so that's how I've always seen it too. So
the article I read talked about, there's a theme in my life here, y'all. It talked about adoption and orphans and how Dorothy is really considered an orphan because, you know, she's being raised or living with her aunt and uncle. So that's how I took it too. Like, she really didn't appreciate them until she was gone for so long, you know, in Oz, and then came back. So I can't remember the self-integration. There we go. Self-integration that like adopted children go through, you know, to kind of like, I guess, let reality set in that, okay, they're not an orphan anymore, but they have a family now, was what Dorothy was going through as she was going through Oz.
How interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting.
And I never even, like, you know, when I was reading the book and when I watched, you know, my sister tortured me with this movie when we were kids. I never, like,
I
thought, oh, yeah.
I thought I saw some flying monkeys around your house. No kidding.
They probably are.
But what did so your sister tortured you with them?
Uh-oh. Oh. Yeah, it was just her favorite movie, and like we watched it like every single day. She was 7 years older than me, so I had to do whatever I was told by her, and I was scared.
Okay, so did anyone ever see Return to Oz, the second Oz movie? That one scared me more than the first Wizard of Oz, because, you know, one of the evil people in that one has like a hallway of heads, and she would like switch out her heads. It was so creepy, and my younger sister used to love this one, and I'm like, what is wrong with you?
I need to find I ran out of time today because I have to do almost everything on the day like today, because the posts come in on Tuesday, but I teach until 3 on Tuesdays, and I'm just done for when I get home, and have a little time for grading. And so Wednesday I get up early, I come in, I'm here about 9 in the morning, and I start working on this class nearly immediately. So it's a really long process of putting all of this together. So I didn't have time to put together all the versions of Oz, but now I'm gonna look at those and see what I can find for our next class too. So many.
I didn't know either until I did a little bit of outside research on it that this is considered like one of the first American fairy tales.
That's right.
And I always thought that Rip Van Winkle took that title, or Washington Irving.
Washington Irving.
That his stories took that. But
No, this one is considered, for some reason, the first American fairy tale.
Well,
Everything else.
The article that I read talked about the American fairy tale with The Wizard of Oz and The Great Gatsby. And so
Okay,
I
yeah.
have that one too.
I saw that. What did it say?
It just kind of alluded to The Wizard of Oz kind of really being an American fairy tale, the first American fairy tale, because it kind of mirrored the American dream in that we were able to kind of build up and make ourselves who we were. And then it talked about The Great Gatsby as the anti-American fairy tale because of how all of that happened within it. But it talked about the consumerism and stuff within American society too, which is the quid pro quo and stuff, as far as I'm only going to do that for you if you do that for me.
And it was also likening like the Emerald City to the green light that's on the end of Gatsby's dock, and like was drawing all these really cool parallels.
Fascinating. Yeah, because in the beginning of The Great Gatsby, it does set up its richness and beauty, and then it's not how it ends in the least. So an anti-fairy tale is kind of appropriate for that, maybe because it's some kind of reality instead of a fairy tale. Been a long time since it was undergraduate, since I've read The Great Gatsby. Although I did see the Robert Redford movie.
Yes, I saw that one too.
Yeah. And I think, was there another one after that?
Leo
DiCaprio.
Yeah, there's
I
another
loved
one.
it. Loved it way more than I liked the book.
I'll have to watch it. Oh, just another one to add to my list in spare time. Okay, let's see.
I was kind of surprised how much of the story was after the witch was dead and Oz had left.
I know. Didn't it feel like it should have ended?
Yeah.
And that they went.
It reminded me a lot of like what happens at the end of the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Like, you know, they have this great defeat, like the good guys win, but then the hobbits go back to the Shire and they still have to fight. Like they are defeated the big bad guy. Now we have to like go deal with this minor character. And so that's kind of the way I felt whenever I was reading.
That's what happens in Huckleberry Finn too. The novel should have ended early, instead it just gets dragged out because I was bored by that part.
Do you think that's because of the way that, you know, we've all seen the movie, I assume we've all seen the movie quite so many times, and the culmination of the story is the death of the witch, and then, you know, and then she goes home, right?
Yes.
And so maybe, I think even I felt that way when I was reading the book. I'd never read the book before, so I was like, oh, this isn't the end. There's still some more.
Still
it's
going.
Like, oh, we're in a world of China.
China.
Okay.
What does that mean?
All right. And yeah.
I felt really odd too because like we don't see big bad wicked witch except for when they go to her castle, whereas in the film we see her putting these stumbling blocks in their path the entire time. And so I was like, but there's like no real challenges here. What's going on? Because I never read the book either.
She's not near as antagonistic in the book as she is in the.
And in fact, Oz is basically asking them to be mercenaries, to be hired killers. for no good reason.
Right.
Rather than just going grabbing
And giving them
the
empty promises in return.
And giving them empty promises in return. So the whole, that's another one of those inattentional things that we kind of miss. That there's no good reason for it to happen in the film or the book.
Right, and it didn't seem like she had a whole lot of magic either. She did the wolves, the bees, and the crows, and then she used the cap for the monkeys, and then after that was done, she's like, well, I don't have anything else I can do. So.
I'm out of tricks.
And I don't think she's green in the book. I flipped back through it.
Yeah, no.
She wasn't green.
No.
Technicolor. Well, and the reason why
Technicolor.
dad in the book was because he was afraid that she would find out that he had no powers.
Yeah, but that's not a good reason. But
But that just shows how delusional.
And so off they go without thinking about this task ahead of them, about breaking in to her home
and killing her.
And then, okay, so did anyone else find it weird that after Dorothy melts her, she just is like, oh, well, okay, and just cleans it up? And
so nonchalant.
I would have been a little traumatized, I think, if I'd seen somebody just melt in front of me like that.
That was the domestic woman.
Yeah.
Rachel, what were you saying?
I was saying in the book, like, there's not much difference between Oz and the Wicked Witch of the West. Like, they do the same thing. She takes over the Winkies, he takes over the people of Emerald City, makes them his slaves, and then gives the Scarecrow that position afterwards. So that's why, like, I thought it was very episodic in nature.
Very much
I
so.
thought it was more like the Odyssey is what it reminded me of. Like, just one.
Well, I suppose it would be.
One adventure after the other to get home is what it reminded me of. But also, I just think the constant, there's no difference between them, I guess. So the constant, like, they continue to idolize him. Even after he leaves, they're like, well, he was still so great, and he gave us what we really wanted, and the wool is never taken away from their eyes. So I don't feel like Dorothy and the Scarecrow and the Tin Man, and all of them, they don't even really evolve much as characters, I don't feel like, because they constantly believe the same thing.
Well, and we can call them composite, a composite. What if you put them all together?
Right.
They're one person with all the qualities. Although there's going to be a conflict between non-meat eating and meat eaters in it, to some degree.
Unless, of course, you look at it in an allegorical sense, in which case they all represent somebody from the Populist Party, blah, blah, blah.
Mm-hmm.
Which was the article I actually wrote on. And because there's this huge debate as to whether this is an allegory or not for the rise and fall of the Populist Party in like the early 1900s.
Mm-hmm.
And then the author, I think his last name was Taylor, he went and told you, like, this is who everybody represents, and this is the historical context that shows you this is who they represent. And I think, like, the presidential candidate that they had was even represented in 2 different ways, because he was the lion and he was also Oz, and like,
Right.
yes. And so it was interesting. But then, like, there's all this controversy. Did he do it that way? Did he not? And like,
There was, actually, I read an article that debunked or attempted to debunk that theory of allegory.
Mm-hmm.
It was actually kind of a counterpoint to that.
Mm-hmm.
I think the original paper that was written that kind of put those theories out there was a history teacher, Littlefield.
Littlefield. Mm-hmm.
And
the gold standard.
And prior to the time when he wrote this paper in the 1960s, mid 1960s, nobody had even come up with that idea or even kind of drawn those parallels. And then after that, all of a sudden it became quite popular and people kind of jumped on the bandwagon. But there was no empirical evidence necessarily to say for certain that Baum ever intended it to be a allegory. Like, he didn't set out to write an allegorical tale. Right?
Well, and that's what Taylor eventually comes to say at the end is, you know, Baum may not have intended for it to be an allegory, but it could still be construed as one. It's not definitively it's an allegory. You can't deny it. He's not saying that at all. He's saying, but you can't deny the fact that it does work as an allegory.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because we know authorial intent is kind of irrelevant for us.
That's new criticism, isn't that? That the text stands
The
alone?
text stands on its own. Yeah, that part is, and so that ignoring the author, and then there came a time, and it's still kind of psychoanalyzing the author, and you know, connecting, so that you know, you probably found out all kinds of things about Baum and his childhood, and about his successes and failures and his illnesses and things like that as a child, and how that might have played out in the novel. But it doesn't really matter in those terms, because basically I want everybody to look at it historically and get that while these things may be true, authorial intent is mitigated at all times by unintentional, unconscious things. Always in the novels. So yeah, it's easy to say Sylvia Plath and her death poems and her issues with her father, you know, all the things that come out in her poetry, and that the very darkness of her poetry that signals mental illness and suicide. That's okay, but it kind of, you know, then it comes to an end. So yeah, the new critics would say the text stands on its own. We don't need to know what the author thought, nor, and this was the important part for those who came later, nor does the historical context. Now, the problem with that was that these critics knew what had been written about the author's intent, author's life, and historical context. They just said it didn't count. But you cannot unring bells, right? Think about how many bells have been going off here that you can't unring. So yeah, that's why pretty constantly direct people toward more historical context than thinking about authorial intent. They're awfully unreliable, those authors are. What was I? There was something. The whole visual thing is, I think, something significant. I guess I'm a pretty visual individual, because I remember things on pages where the location is, down at the bottom, in the middle of the book, something like that. I remember students by where they sit in larger classrooms, and movies, films, no matter if I've read the book first or not, the film overrides the book, so that I will most likely mistake, no matter how many times, and I've read the novel, I don't know how many times, because I've taught it over the years several times, and I read it every time. But I've also seen the film, you know, that's what I grew up with. It's really hard for me to remember, for instance, that the shoes are silver and not ruby red. To not see Judy Garland as Dorothy.
Picture the witch as green.
And exactly, yeah. There's nothing that says the witch was green, but I just go ahead.
I was gonna say, I just want to say I had never read the book, so I just kept waiting for those slippers to turn ruby. And I was like, seriously? They never turn red? I just waited. I mean, all the way to the last page. It was just naive and horrible. And I was so mystified. I was like, really? Like, I waited and waited. And then the yellow brick road thing. It's not called the yellow brick road. I waited and waited.
It's not?
No, it's like the road of bricked yellow. Or
Yellow brick, yeah, or something like
it's
that.
the road
Right?
of yellow brick. And it drives me nuts. Who is going to tell Elton?
It's like our lives are lies.
Yes, my whole
lies.
life has been a lie. It was my first reaction. I didn't even care about like plot resolution or her finding some lesson. I was like, what?
Yeah, the slippers aren't ruby, the witch isn't green.
And the road,
yellow brick road.
It's not the yellow brick road.
Emerald City isn't green.
Take off the glasses. Yeah.
And you made me think of something. List those things again, because there was something that I was gonna.
Yeah, the ruby slippers weren't.
Okay, the ruby slippers. You probably read about it, that they decided that ruby red would show up better on the silver screen. So and that's why, and they made them ruby red, and they're right. And what's more, I think they're much more beautiful than the silver slippers. I can't imagine the silver slippers as being as beautiful.
Agreed. I feel like if they were ruby in the book and they made him silver in the movie, I would say the reverse. I don't know. Like, can't trust myself anymore.
That's right. You can't. You cannot trust yourself. And this is when memory fails me too, because no matter, like I said, no matter how many times I read the novel, I will always put into it Yellow Brick Road.
Follow the bothered me that she walked around in a circle on that thing. Did that not bother anybody else?
Just walk over the red. Like,
yes, I was like, you were wasting so much time right now. I thought you wanted to
get to the point.
She had to do it to the song, and if she did
like
that,
the
song,
it was hurting me.
Start at the beginning.
Did you notice how many stories are contained within the story? We get the story of the Scarecrow, the story of the Tin Woodman, of the Lion, of the monkeys, of Oz,
the witch,
the witches, yeah,
the witches. So everybody, there are so many backstories in this episodic novel that it's kind of stunning.
I love that though. I do. I love that.
I felt like it helped us get to know the characters more. Like they didn't feel as random.
But it's so like organically done. Like that's kind of how life is. I feel like I know so many people and I know their stories, and the way you find out is just sometimes very sudden in that way. And
yeah.
So I think that's awesome to have that, and such a short story as well.
Did anybody do the article on disability?
I almost did.
Nobody did it in here?
No, it's in here. I almost did it, but I saw where someone had already.
Okay.
So, no.
That is my favorite article. I have two articles that I really, really, three articles that I really, really like bringing up to students. One is by Anita Tarr on the Chocolate War, where she talks about the binaries of being screwed and unscrewed throughout the whole thing. It's marvelously put together, the way that it's amazing. Another one is Freud, the Neverland of Id, which is a Freudian take on Peter Pan and Neverland, which you would have read in one of my classes, 399, because I try to always introduce that for Freud. And then the other one is this particular one about disability and how it's represented. And I'm going to very specifically talk about that during the next session, because I think you should all know about that one for sure. Rachel, what was the article that you read?
It was called
And what was it out of?
Children's Literature Quarterly.
Okay.
It was called The Difficulty in Deciphering the Dreams That You Dare to Dream, Adaptive Dissonance in the Wizard of Oz.
Wow, that's a title. Even a long title.
Yeah, the article was so, it took me forever to read it. I started at one point and then I had to like step away and like process the whole thing. But also it was difficult because I've never seen a lot of the adaptations. They talked about The Wiz, which I haven't seen, and then they even compared the Broadway version of The Wiz to the film version.
Oh, that's right.
And how those contradict each other, which was so interesting, but I didn't have anything to base that off of except what I was reading, like the quick summaries.
So so you had to take the word for it and
there was like the whole second half of it was pretty much that for me. I just understood the parts about the 1939 film and the novel itself, which was interesting and fascinating, but it was just a lot in one article.
And Christopher, what was your article? The title and what journal did it come from?
The Fable of the Allegory. Kind of just what we just discussed a moment ago. And the author's last name was Hansen. And I can't remember what journal it came from, but it's on my works cited on the post.
Good.
Want to look it up.
I will be. I'll be looking at all of them. I didn't get to because I didn't ask for it early enough. I didn't ask for it on Tuesday. Instead, I said before class or, oh well. But we have next week to talk about it. And maybe we should watch some more Barbie.
Oh, God.
You know that we got a Barbie movie for just about everything on this.
I did not know that, actually.
Yeah,
Is there a Wizard of Oz Barbie movie?
There is
Barbie.
a Barbie movie for almost everything.
Yeah, that's Barbie as
Say no.
fill in the blank. Yeah.
Oh, that's
Those
too
were
much.
bad.
All right, so we've come to about the end of the class. It's a little early. It's 9:51. We can talk about 9 minutes more if you want.
I just have one observation that kind of came back to me here, going back to what you had said about the Tin Woodman and his axe obsession. Really, the Tin Woodman, out of all of the characters in this book, has the biggest axe to grind with the Wicked Witch.
That's right. You're right.
She made him into the Tin Woodman, right? There's this passage here where basically she bewitched it or ensorcelled his axe, so he cut himself to pieces, right?
Yeah, that's
Quite strange.
Brutally.
Right?
How brutal is that?
Bear that in mind when we read Wicked.
Yeah, so I'm part of the week. Well, I started to listen to the audiobook.
It's fabulous, isn't it?
It was great. In fact, my wife and I started listening to it. We have a kind of a project going up in the woods. We're fixing up this little house up there, and so we play audiobooks when we're listening together. And my wife loved it so much. She called. I was on a business trip the past couple of days. She called me. She was like, "Okay, I ordered the 4-book set. It's on. They're on the way." So she's hooked. We're all hooked, and I loved it. I love it so far. But yeah, I mean, he hacks himself to pieces because the Wicked Witch. It was the Wicked Witch of the East that made him chop himself to pieces.
Is she the one that
She
ended
cut
up
off his
dead?
arms, cut off his legs, cut off his arms. Yeah, this is the one that Dorothy killed.
Okay.
So.
Under the house.
Sorry, I was thinking it was the Wicked Witch of
Okay.
the West. I just glanced back at it.
I mean, he still has.
Nevertheless, he's got a thing against Wicked Witches, right?
I was like,
This is-
yeah,
this-
he's the only one that has any personal experience with a Wicked Witch out of their little entourage.
Yeah. The Wicked Witch then made the axe slip and cut off my head. And at first I thought that was the end of me. But the tinner happened to come along and made me a new head out of tin, and
Fortunately.
everything was fine. Right?
Because that's totally how biology.
Right.
I think it goes back to what Rachel was saying too, though, about like just how dense all of them are. Like if I chop off my leg once, okay, fluke. Chop off my second leg, okay. Like if I just keep swinging the same axe, then maybe my head deserves to be lopped off too. Right?
But it's an enchanted axe.
You can also look into what that says about like what he's willing to do for love.
For
you know,
love.
And it almost reminds me of like the biblical story of Jacob and Laban, and like Laban consistently tricks Jacob, but he's so in love with Rachel, he's just willing to work for 14 years for her and be tricked into it over and over. So it's like, what will people do for love?
Like, couldn't you go get another axe or like train somebody? Like, I'm just saying, like, if I'm chopping my limbs off, because I imagine it didn't happen in too terribly long of a span of time. I think that I might have an inkling.
Reconsider.
Like, maybe, just maybe.
I should get a new axe.
I mean, I have no appendages that are mine anymore. Maybe.
I don't have another field of work besides being a woodman, period.
But he was doing it for love. That's what they all say.
Like, would you love a man who couldn't figure out that, like, maybe I shouldn't swing an axe? Like, I've lost all my, like.
Did I dream that? Or he was building a cabin for the little munchkin girl? How's
He
he
was.
building a cabin without chopping?
Pay someone to do it.
And the witch, it doesn't.
She didn't want him to marry her.
That's right, because the witch wants the little munchkin girl to continue working for her.
No, that was the girl's
No,
mother.
the witch
No.
is paid. Yeah.
That was the girl's mother, and she was like, the daughter needs to stay home with me.
Oh, that's right.
So
Yeah.
the munchkin girl was Rapunzel.
Yes.
Right.
Rapunzel has a perfect mic drop.
Rapunzel as the little munchkin girl.
Oh my gosh.
Oh my. Yeah, if we listed all the contradictions, this would be such a failure of a book. The new critics would say it fails in every way possible.
You know, I still think that the main thrust, coming away from the book in general, I still think that the main thrust was just that, you know, that all along, kind of going back to what you were saying, it's these characters always possessed these traits that they thought that they were desperately missing, right? They had that within them. And I think that if there was a lesson, if I could guess at author intent, it would be that was it, right? That you know, there's courage and heart and
that you
brains,
always
know,
have, you already have
may
what
question
you need.
yourself, but you've got it inside of you.
Yeah,
right?
you already have what you need.
And that as the lesson in the book itself that earns out. And I think that works for me. And I think that that's probably how the book became so seated in.
And he started this.
The canon
He was
of
telling
American
was it his nieces and nephews or little relative kids that these stories, and that's how it all started out, which is pretty common.
I was going to say, it's very Lewis Carroll of him, isn't it?
Well, maybe.
Yeah, but you know, Lewis Carroll had some issues.
Without the pedophile thing going.
Yeah, that thing, that part. Though he kept it in check from what?
Sure.
Chris goes home to read about Lewis Carroll.
Yeah. Okay. Have we had fun today? As usual. All right, so just get that stuff. When do I have a due date on it? Because I really need it.
Next week, these papers.
You said by Tuesday.
Okay, good. Do I have that written down any place?
I'm not sure.
I think
It just
it's
says
on
we.
the submission.
On the main one, our end.
Okay, great. I'm glad to hear that. Because heaven knows, who was it that we kept trading off and on about, it's that Dropbox isn't there?
Oh, that's
that was
me.
you.
Yeah.
And then somebody else was doing the same thing.
I was a little bit lost. I felt like I was missing something important for sure.
Yeah. Well, just remember, teaching tolerance.
Thank you for tolerating my email.
And it's been a pleasure.